Phase 3 of the Raiders offseason workout program begins today. So what does that mean? What does that entail? We'll tell you all that plus a whole lot more on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for Monday, May 20th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thanks so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. As always, if you're giving us a look on YouTube, you know we appreciate that. The show continues to grow each and every day, and that's because of you and my man Ari. Does a fantastic job each and every day, making sure we're on YouTube, we're looking good, we're sounding good, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, because, again, without Ari, there is no Locked On Raider podcast on the YouTube page. So we definitely appreciate that. Check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And you know you want to chime in on the show, be a part of the show, 707-654-4693. That's a Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Calls and texts will come up in segment number 3 of today's show, and got a lot of feedback over the course of the weekend. So we'll try to get to as much of that as possible coming up in segment number 3. Segment number 2, Cynthia Frelund from the NFL Network. She joined my radio show, and the topic that we talked about on Friday's show here on the podcast was win total projections. She did, in fact, join my radio show on Friday, so you'll hear what she had to say about the Raiders. I'm not going to go through the whole conversation. It was almost 20 minutes long. Fantastic stuff, but kind of gave a further explanation to what she was talking about, the formula that went into the win total projections, and how she feels about the Raiders overall. There's really just a lot of questions that she still has that the Raiders as a team, they can actually answer, and that could change that win total projections. But you'll hear that conversation I had with Cynthia, all based on the Raiders, coming up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, just news and notes collected over the weekend, and we'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. And really, before we get started, I did want to give a big shout out to my man Sal, who was in town. He's from Fresno, does tattoos in Fresno. Matter of fact, he's on Twitter, Tattoos by Sal Rodriguez. That's his header name. That's not his Twitter handle. His Twitter handle is, it's really complicated. It's got a bunch of numbers, but you can find him on there. I've been rocking with Sal for a long time, from back in the day when I was even at Q97 in Fresno. So he was in town over the weekend. We were hanging out at Sweet Tea Tattoos, and of course had to do a little ink work, had to get a little busy because that's what we do. But fantastic shop. Definitely encourage you to go check them out if you ever come in town. Sweet Tea Tattoos in Vegas. Just look them up and they'll take good care of you. But shout out to my man Sal. It's great to see him, hang out with him for a while. Long-time Raider fan, and like I said, a long-time friend in general. So just glad to see him in town and be able to hang out with him. So shout out to my man, again, big-time Raider fan, and he'll be at a couple games this season. That is for sure. So off top, the Raiders offseason program continues today. I mentioned that on Friday's show, May 20th, 21st, and then May 23rd. So what is Phase 3? What does that actually do? Well, offense versus defense, they can do that. 7-on-7, 11-on-11, all that is permitted for the first time during the offseason. And look, the last time we were out there at the Raiders facility, it was rookie minicamp. And I'll tell you, man, it was the first day of rookie minicamp, but it looked like they had been out there for a couple weeks, right? I mean, they were getting after it. They were moving with a quick pace. The communication was really good, which is surprising. When you have a bunch of rookies for their first practice, you think it's going to be a little sloppy, and it didn't look like that, which told me that there was a lot of homework work that the rookies have been putting in. So I'm interested to see, as we'll be out there on Tuesday, what this looks like, Phase 3, when they can do 7-on-7, 11-on-11. I feel like the tempo is really quick with an Antonio Pierce-led practice. So I look forward to seeing what it looks like. And then again, as I mentioned before, on Tuesday, we'll be able to talk to all 3 coordinators before practice: Luke Getsy, Patrick Graham, Tom McMahon, and then we'll talk to about 3 players following practice. And the Raiders have already reached out and asked us what players we wanted, so a bunch of us submitted our names. We don't know who we're going to get, but there's, like I said, Nate Hobbs and Jack Jones, Aiden O'Connell, obviously. There was other guy, Tyree Wilson was somebody that was suggested. There was plenty of different suggestions that we have out there, so I'm sure we'll get some really good ones, but that comes up on Tuesday. But the offseason program does start today, and of course the conversation to always pay attention to: what does it look like when it comes to practice? It's always going to be about what the quarterbacks look like, how the offensive line is starting to come together, and maybe the the defense, what Christian Wilkins looks like. Obviously Max, who he's going to be. What does the running backs looks like? But really the main two focuses I think will always be the offensive line and the quarterback competition. So that's something that I'm sure we'll be talking about quite a bit over the course of the next couple days. I mentioned Aiden O'Connell. Him and a few other Raiders were at this event over the weekend, Raiders Business on Course event. It was a golf tournament over the weekend, and Vinny Bonsignor, who's from the Las Vegas Review-Journal and also Raider Nation Radio 920, did a fantastic job and was out there covering this event. And so he was able to pick up some sound and send it over to me and say, Q, you might be interested in this. And the first one is Aiden O'Connell, and this is just Aiden O'Connell commenting. You'll hear Vinny ask another question, but Aiden O'Connell just talking about the challenges of a quarterback competition.
It's hard. I still haven't figured that out. I think, that's not unique to me, but I think that's a challenge that's going to be ongoing in my career. And so it's what you said. It's taking it day by day. And, I'm not going to be perfect. I have to remind myself that I so badly want to be perfect every time I go out there. And so trying to give myself some grace to fail, but also trying to be as perfect as I can. I'm trying to find that balance, I think, is something that's really hard, but also, it's a challenge I enjoy trying to tackle.
Antonio said that you earned the right to take the first snap, OTA's training camp. How does that make you feel to hear your coach say that?
Yeah, I think, again, since really AP started, he's put a lot of confidence in me and given me a great opportunity. And so just trying to make the most of the opportunity. It really is a privilege and opportunity to get to play on the team and to get reps at the quarterback position. So trying to make the most of it, take every day, and just trying to make the most of each day that I'm given.
So there's Aiden O'Connell talking about a quarterback competition and the challenges, and also, being appreciative of hearing Antonio Pierce saying that he's earned the rights to the, first team snaps come training camp. And look, this is something that Aiden O'Connell is not new to, right? Battling and fighting and trying to earn his job. He's done that his whole life, right? Going back to college, obviously in the NFL now, he's going to be doing the same thing. So it's not something that he's a stranger to. Is it difficult? Sure. But he's got the mental makeup. I know he's got it between the ears. We know what he was able to do towards the end of the season. I like what he brings to the table. I've said it before. I think he's going to end up being the quarterback to start the season under center. He'll be QB1, but that's just my gut feeling on May 20th, right? Anything could change, obviously, throughout the course of the offseason programs and obviously training camp and the preseason as well. The preseason is going to be important for those guys as well. So there's that. That was Aiden O'Connell just on the challenges of a quarterback battle. And then Michael Mayer, he was a second-round pick of the Silver and Black last season, tight end out of Notre Dame, and then the Raiders doubled down and picked Brock Bowers, the tight end out of Georgia, with their first-round pick, number 13 overall. So a lot of people thought, what in the world are you doing? Well, Vinny was able to catch up with Michael Mayer and get his thoughts on that as well. Check it out.
Brock Bowers in the first round. I know in your Notre Dame days, you're quite used to playing alongside other tight ends, and 12 personnel, 13 personnel.
Yep.
Do you feel like that could be a seamless transition with you and Brock?
100%. Look, our job is to win ball games. As an offense, we need to score touchdowns, and that's what we're going to do to the best of our ability. We can play a lot of 12 personnel. We can play a lot of 11. We got a lot of weapons. I think you guys know that. We got a lot of weapons. So I'm excited. I already met Brock. Been practicing with Brock for a week. He's a great guy, so it's been good.
Obviously, you guys were, not that you guys were circling each other in college, but it was 1-2, 1-2, 2, whatever order you want to put it in. So you've been aware of his game. He's been aware of your game.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I think we battled for the Mackey 2 years in a row, right? Yeah.
So what do you think about his game?
Oh, he's fast. He's got great hands. He can block. I mean, he can do it all. I feel like, we can both do it all. I think we're going to be dangerous. I think we're going to have a great offense. That's kind of all I got to say about it. It's going to be a lot of fun.
So there was Michael Mayer, and he thinks that him and Brock Bowers are going to be a good 1-2 punch, right? And really be dangerous weapons. And I agree with him, right? I think the more that the Raiders have opportunities to go out there and score points, the better, right? They just did not score enough points last year. Tom Telesco said that after they drafted Brock Bowers. We all knew it, covering the team, watching the team, cheering for the team all last season. The big hang up was, how come they can't get over 20 points? How come they can't get over 20 points? How come they can't get 20 points, right? That was always the question, like, what in the world is going on? So any way that they have an opportunity to score points, I think is going to be a good thing, and Brock Bowers is definitely going to help that. And even though I've only seen him once up close and personal at rookie minicamp, he is as advertised. He is big and fast and strong. And between him and Michael Mayer, I think that's going to be a hell of a 1-2 punch. I did want to pass along the preseason games. I mentioned preseason is going to be important for Aiden O'Connell, and also Gardner Minshew really kind of sealed the deal on who's going to be, the starting quarterback. I wanted to pass it along. We knew the teams that they were going to be playing. We didn't know the actual dates and the times. August 10th is at Minnesota. That'll be the first preseason game. That's going to be a 1 p.m. kickoff. August 17th versus the Cowboys. That'll be at Allegiant Stadium, 7 p.m. kickoff for that one. And then August 23rd versus the 49ers. That's also at Allegiant Stadium, 7 p.m. kickoff as well. So wanted to make sure I passed that along and just kind of let you know, just in case you were deciding that you want to go to a preseason game or not. And of course, Raider Nation shows up and shows out for all the games. So excited about the opportunity to be back in Allegiant Stadium, or even when they're on the road, being able to see Raider Nation show up to these games. So that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, kind of news and notes collected over the course of the weekend. Coming up in segment number 2, the win total projection for the AFC West. I talked about it in great detail on Friday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, and then I was able to catch up with Cynthia Frelund later on in the afternoon, the person who actually put together the win total projection. So we're not going to go through the whole conversation I had with her on Friday on my radio show, but you will hear what she had to say about the silver and black. We'll do that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Winner take all time in the NBA. Fantastic action on Sunday, right? Multiple Game 7s. And really, I mean, man, the Dallas Mavericks almost had a Game 7 as well against OKC, but OKC choked it away with just a couple seconds left on Saturday. I thought there was going to be 3 Game 7s in the NBA. There was not, but it's winner take all time. We love it. NBA playoffs is fantastic. NHL, the Stanley Cup playoffs, is fantastic as well. FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. Go to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com to look at all odds at everything that you need to know, all the good stuff that you need to know. Make sure you do. Check it out again, FanDuel.com. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to continue with the win total projections conversation we had on Friday. I was actually going to talk about the playoff teams from 2023 and who the Raiders could replace, who they realistically could replace in 2024. We'll actually hold that conversation off until Tuesday, only because I wanted to follow up on what we talked about on Friday. I didn't want to talk about it on Friday, then start talking about playoffs, and then go back to it, or just kind of leave it hanging. So since I did get a chance to catch up with Cynthia Frelund, I wanted to kind of put a bow on this conversation, right, and just kind of get the explanation from her, what she had to say, and not necessarily about the whole AFC West, but just about the silver and black. But before we get into what she had to say, again, the win total projections that are up on NFL.com from Cynthia Frelund, you can check out right now. We talked about it on Friday. The Chiefs, she has them at 10.9, Chargers at 8.2, the Raiders at 6.4, and the Broncos at 5.7. She also said, here's how to read these win projections using the projected 53-man rosters as of May 14th. I ran 150,000 simulations for all 272 regular season games, right? I have made roster projections using the best information available. It's May, so you should check back for the updated versions of these win total projections before the season starts. These simulations yielded a projected win total for each team, which, thanks to the multitude of factors involved, is not always a round number. The top 7 teams in each conference are my projected playoff participants. So that was kind of the formula that she went by and how she came up with these win total projections. She just didn't pull it out her backside, throw it up against the wall, and hope that it stuck, right? That's not the case. But again, Chiefs at 10.9, Chargers at 8.2, Raiders at 6.4, Broncos at 5.7. So here we go. Here's myself and Cynthia Frelund as we start off talking all things silver and black and how she came up with the projections and what she thinks about the team in general. Diving into the win total projections, and obviously I was paying attention to the AFC West the most. We'll start with the Raiders, where you had a 6.4 win total projection, but it sounded like, as I was reading through the write-up on it, that, you know, you almost felt like your projections were being underestimated, or the model formula was kind of underestimating the Raiders because there's a lot of unknown.
Right. So it's a little easier always to estimate for teams with tons of continuity, and especially at the quarterback position, continuity is key. I think you know that just from watching football. You can imagine that. So lots of changes, a completely different situation in terms of like what Antonio Pierce brings to his offseason. There's a huge brain trust there. Marvin Lewis is one of the smartest football minds, and maybe we don't talk about him enough, but he will really help kind of get all of these guys rallied in one direction. So that's, I'm going to say, confusing for the model. And also, there's we have to talk about it. Quarterback is not solved for. Right. I don't exactly know what it's going to look like, and either does anyone else, right? So at that same time, the more we see during preseason, the more we see during, what's going on and what's the strategy, what kind of team, what kind of offense is this going to be? We already know the defensive front is really good. Great. Check, check, check. But what about the rest? And we know Devontae Adams is sick too. And don't get me wrong. We know some good things, but when you don't know quarterback, that's a big question mark.
Right. There's no doubt. Cynthia Frelund is with us here on Raider Nation Radio 920 and Necessary Roughness, talking about win total projections. And, you mentioned in the piece, the Raiders are going to need above average quarterback play. So if you're a Raider fan, you got to feel confident that, okay, if you get that above average quarterback play with the weapons that you have, the offense could end up being pretty good. But again, with this, it's just still the unknown of what the quarterback play is going to be.
Yeah. And let's just remember there's a difference between, I use 5 categories. Anyone in data science, they have to use an odd number. So you could use 3 or you could use 5. I find 5 to be better. So elite, above average, average, below average, and then well below average. Those are my 5. And all you need is something to be average or a little bit more. Think like Brock Purdy, right? Mm-hmm. He ended up leading the league last year in expected points added, which is a really valuable metric, more valuable than quarterback win share even, obviously. And then you also have him leading the league in completion percentage. So you can throw fast passes, you can throw, deep passes. They're going to be less often completed. So it's all about the strategy. So if you're Brock Purdy leading in, passer rating, then that's going to be a different metric than if you hand the ball off a ton, right? So it's just going to be, how does this thing operate? What do we got here? We know what Gardner Minshew looked like last year in the Colts, but the Colts didn't have any guy that compares to Devontae Adams. No shade to any of their receivers, but that does make a huge difference. However, the Colts had Quentin Nelson at guard. That's a pretty good guard. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things that are going to look different, and the Colts also ran the ball a lot. How's it going to work, right? We don't exactly know yet.
No, you're right. You're right. That's a great breakdown. I love it. Again, Cynthia Frelund is with us here on Raider Nation Radio 920, talking all things win total projections. Another piece that you pointed out when it came to the Raiders was kind of like their balance with the schedule. You mentioned that they have a tough stretch before their bye, but then they have that bye, right? I mean, they have Kansas City, they have the Bengals, they have a bye, they have Miami. Those are tough games, but that 1 week, that bye, that week off is really going to help and kind of softens that stretch.
This is the opposite of last year's schedule. Last year's schedule was very tough. 3 away games. It just was look, your opponents are who they are. You get luckier or you don't. And every year it rotates. This year is a more favorable schedule. No shade to the NFC South, but playing the NFC South is a much more favorable division as one of the rotating divisions than, let's say if you had to play, I don't know, the NFC North or, something where you're playing more difficult teams. So it's a good, sometimes you get the wrong end and this year you get the right end.
Right. They had the bye week in week 13 last year. This time having the bye week in week 10 is way better than
10 or 11 is primo.
Right.
At least from historical analysis, 10 or 11, that's the primo time for a bye. Of course, there are always teams that can use it at different times based on injuries. But if you just look at the aggregate of the data, the best 2 weeks are 10 and 11.
I love it. I love it. Breaking it all down from an analytics side of things is Cynthia Frelund from the NFL Network here on Raider Nation Radio 920. And so also one part of the schedule that I think is ideal for the Raiders if they can hang around is the last quarter. The 4 games at the end of the season, 3 out of 4 at home, and none of those games are games of teams that were in the playoffs a year ago. I feel like that's a favor. Right. That's a solid right there for the Raiders.
Absolutely. That's the interesting part is you kind of want an on-ramp that's easy and you want an off-ramp that's more favorable too, right? Mm-hmm. And the Raiders, all things considered, given who your opponents are and how it could have shaken out, that's a good on and off ramp. It's not bad. The middle is where it gets a little dicier, like we said, but that's fine, right? You want a little bit of time to establish, because preseason isn't really preseason anymore. People are kind of resting start. There's so many different philosophies about preseason that it's more or less useful, typically less useful in recent years, right? So that's going to be your on-ramp is September, your off-ramp, is late December. So I think it's just going to matter I hate to put pressure on one position, but I mean, that's why the quarterbacks make the big bucks, right? Because they are the ones who really determine a lot of your team.
So that was the explanation and the breakdown. And again, you hear what she had to say about the Raiders, and she feels like the schedule is pretty favorable because of the way that it's kind of evened out. It's not too top heavy and it's not too bottom heavy, right? You kind of get into the kind of ease into it. Of course, the game against Baltimore is a real tough one, week 2. But, you know, just you look at it, it's really balanced. I think that's the key word is balance. The bye week is in a very reasonable spot. It's not the Raiders aren't playing the Chiefs following their bye week either. So there's some things to like about the Raiders schedule. And I look at it and I know that it looks tough. And obviously it's a tougher schedule and, you know, tied for 8th as far as the strength of schedule of the opponents that they're going to be playing. But that's something that we already knew. I just think that it's balanced out pretty well, and it gives the Raiders a fighting chance. Now, obviously, they got to go out there and do the hard work, the heavy lifting. A lot of folks talking about the Raiders quarterback room as the very worst in the league. The quarterbacks are the very worst in the league. I would say that the quarterbacks, Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew can't be the last quarterbacks as far as the worst in the league, only because they have experience. Right, I would have to look at all the rookies that are coming in and say, wait, hold on, they haven't taken a snap in the NFL yet. You don't know what they're going to do. And their situations are all something special, right? So I wouldn't put the Raiders dead last. I can understand the hesitancy to put, Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew high up on the tiers when it comes to quarterbacks, only because, their projections aren't as high as some others. But I wouldn't put them dead last when there's quarterbacks that haven't done one thing, not even take one snap in the NFL as of yet. But hopefully that kind of put a bow on the win total projections conversation for the AFC West and the Raiders in general with Cynthia Frelund. Tomorrow we definitely will get into the playoff conversation of where the Raiders or who the Raiders could replace. That was a playoff team in 2023. I'll probably do that on my radio show this afternoon, and then we'll talk about it on the podcast tomorrow as well. So that's what I got for you for segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about Game Time. They have great last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets. And now that we know the NFL schedule, we know the whole meal deal. We know where the Raiders will play in Week 1. We know where they'll play in Week 5, where they'll play in Week 8, where they play in Week 12. We know everything. Now you can start putting everything together. Now you can start getting your plans together. You can start figuring out what games you want to go to, what games you're thinking about going to, and you can start circling them on your calendar. And the good thing is you don't have to buy your tickets right away. You could just have a plan in place, and then boom, Game Time is your last minute spot. If you decide that, yeah, you know what, I do want to go to that game in Cincinnati against the Bengals before the Raiders go on their bye week, boom, all of a sudden you can go to Game Time and you can make that happen. They have priority last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and a whole lot more. They've got the seat view, so you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you actually buy the ticket, so you know where you're going to be sitting and what it looks like adjacent to the field. They got the lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference, and your purchase is always covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, $20 off your first purchase. All you've got to do is download the Game Time app. Use that promo code. It's all one word, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Here we go, Raider Nation, in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Raider Too Much. He's calling to wave the white flag to Roger Goodell in the NFL. I'm assuming he's talking about the Raiders schedule. I'm not 100% sure, but here he is. New caller, no booty caller, Raider Too Much.
Yo, Q, what up? Raider Too Much. First time, long time. Hey, love your show, man. Love everything you guys do. Look, man, we need to get the message out to Goodell and the Raider Nation. Okay, Goodell, we quit. We don't hate you no more. We love you. Stop picking on us. I know he manipulates the league, changing the schedules. He has all this power, and he's still picking on us, and I'm tired of it. We concede. We submit, bro. We quit. You the big dog. Just leave us alone. Give us a fair shot. All right.
Too much. Thanks so much for the call. I appreciate you. And like I said, I think that you're talking about the schedule when you're telling Goodell that I tap out, waving the white flag. If it is a schedule, I think it's pretty reasonable, man. I think the schedule's pretty reasonable. I don't think there's any reason to tap out and wave the white flag and, tell Roger Goodell to stop doing the Raiders wrong. The schedule looks pretty reasonable. It really does. I think that there's a good chance that the team can navigate the waters of the schedule. It doesn't go on a stretch where it's just brutal, right? To me, it doesn't. There's a couple games that I look at and say, okay, like the Rams, Chiefs, who's right after that? Rams, Chiefs, Bengals. Then they go on the bye, and then they have the Dolphins coming out of that one. The Rams are kind of up in the air. I know the Steelers are there as well. It's like, okay, well, see what the Steelers are about. The Chiefs are the Chiefs, that, right? And Cincinnati, that's week 9. Is Joe Burrow going to be healthy? I mean, there's a bunch of questions, right? I mean, and of course, who's healthy on the Raiders, right? I mean, anything could happen, but just on paper, games aren't won or lost on paper. I get that. It looks pretty reasonable. But thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. Love the name, too. Raider Too Much. Up next, got a text from Ant Dog from the ATL. It says, Q, it's your boy Ant Dog Raider from the ATL. I know everyone's hyped about the schedule. I could see double-digit wins with a wild card berth. That's not the reason for the text. I'm texting about AP's comments concerning Aiden O'Connell changing his body. No doubt that's a good thing. Hopefully he strengthened his core, which would add more velocity on the ball and also make him a little harder to bring down. I think the Raiders quarterback room is going to surprise a lot of people. There's a level of commitment that's in the air that hasn't been there for a while. This feels different than the previous off seasons. Keep doing what you do and keep doing what you do and how you do it. Love the show as always. Raiders. That's Ant Dog from the ATL. And thanks so much for the text. And yeah, that's something that, if we have an opportunity to talk to Aiden O'Connell on Tuesday, that's something that I definitely want to ask. What has he done to work on his body? Because AP did throw that out there, but didn't get into specifics and didn't expect him to. But would love to hear from O'Connell, like exactly what it is that he's been working on and what that is supposed to do, right? So whatever he's working on, how does that project onto the field to make him a better quarterback? That's one of the questions that I definitely want to ask him. And as far as the level of commitment, I think you're spot on. I think that's the best way to word it. We've been talking about that quite a bit throughout the course of the offseason, but that's probably the best way to word it. I think you just hit it on the head right there. I mean, you just wrote a show title for me, right? Raiders level of commitment at an all-time high, right? I mean, it feels like that. I still have the image of Jack Jones running in on the first day of the offseason workouts, when the voluntary workouts, and yelling and screaming, we're back, and him running into the facility super early in the morning. Like, that's the kind of stuff that you don't normally see from the Raiders, and it feels like that they're all bought in to what they're trying to do. The culture, something I talk about all the time, that every new coach says that they need to change. Feels like when Antonio Pierce took over on November 1st, he started immediately changing the culture, and now it is a whole 100% bought in. Even Brock Bowers said it when we met with him at the rookie minicamp. Yeah, they look like they have a pretty good culture here. I just need to go in here and play ball, and help them win, right? And so that's one of the things that stood out to me about what Brock Bowers had to say when we met with them at day 1 of rookie minicamp. But Ant Dog, thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Raider M. He's calling to ask about tickets, hotel, and shares his thoughts on the Raiders' overall record. And it does depend on who the quarterback's going to be. Here he is, Raider M.
Hey, Q. This is Raider M calling in. Had a couple questions, or really one question for you. But first, I want to say thanks for everything you do. Love the show. Love listening to it late at night when I'm at work, graveyard shift. So always catch it when it first comes out usually. So much appreciated. My question for you is, I'm going to be attending my first home game in the new stadium this year with my wife, and I was just wondering what is the best way and best price, I should say, way to get tickets, where I should look. I live over in Oregon, so just wanted to know if you have any insight on the best place to buy tickets for home games. That'd be awesome, and possibly like which hotel is best to stay in. That would be much appreciated. Also, just wanted to give in my 2 cents on the record I think we'll have in the next season. I think that if we start with O'Connell at quarterback, I think we're going about 7-10, 8-9, same as last year. I don't see us going over 500. I think if we start Minshew, I think he gets us to 10 wins, maybe even 11, because he's got something to prove, being basically a career backup. And, he can extend plays better. He can move with his feet. I just think he gives us the chance that we need to have a playoff berth. So I'm hoping Minshew is the starter week 1 and he takes us to the playoffs. That would be awesome, but that's just my prediction, just keeping it short. So thanks again. Love what you do, and hope I hear back from you. Go Raiders.
Raider M, thanks for the call. I appreciate you. And I would say if you want tickets, go to Game Time. Right? They can get all your tickets, right? Download the Game Time app. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Boom, you gave me a commercial without even having to do it. I do appreciate you. But they got the best deals for tickets, last-minute tickets. I tell you all the time. Unless you know Vegas Jess, he's the only one that gets the last-minute ticket hookup better than anybody, right? My man says, I ain't going to this game, Q. I ain't going to this game. Next thing I know, hey, Q, look, I got my flashlight on. Look, hey, there I am. You can see me in the press box. And then, boom, there he is right there. And that ain't nothing I made up. That's facts. He does that every single game. But that's him. He's a special dude in many different ways. Hotels, I would say just search for it. Man, the earlier the better. Search, do your research. Look for your best deal. Get it the earlier the better. Worst case scenario, you can always cancel and get your money back. As far as the overall record, good stuff. Aiden gets you 7 to 8 wins. Minshew gets you 10 to 11. That's a heck of a window, right? 7 to 8 or 10 to 11. That's a heck of a window because you want to have that double-digit wins. You want to get that playoff berth. 10 wins isn't going to guarantee you make the playoffs, but it's going to give you a really good shot. Right, so that's interesting thoughts, and if that's the case, then Minshew will probably be the guy that gets to start. If Antonio Pierce feels the same way, if the coaching staff feels the same way that he gives you an opportunity to get to double-digit wins and O'Connell doesn't, then Minshew will probably be that guy. That's why the quarterback battle will be great to pay attention to. Right, we'll get to see a little bit of it firsthand on Tuesday when we're out there at the facility, and of course throughout the course of training camp, we'll see it every day. Preseason, we'll get to see it each and every one of those games. So that's going to be a real, true quarterback competition in the league that I'm definitely looking forward to. But whoever gives the Raiders the opportunity to get to that double-digit wins is who should be out there, the starting quarterback. I happen to think it's going to be O'Connell, but I respect the fact that you think Minshew gives them the better chance. Thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Southern Indiana Raider. It says, hey, Q, Southern Indiana Raider here. I just saw an article on the internet that got me fired up. It was a ranking of all 32 starting quarterbacks in the league. Coming in dead last, Aiden O'Connell. I've wanted him to improve, and I'm not giving up on him. No way he's dead last. Insulting to say that at the least. I hope the Raiders flip the bird to all these experts and make them eat their words. Anyway, thank you for my daily dose of silver and black. Go Raiders. That's Southern Indiana Raider. Thanks for the text. I appreciate you. And, we'll have to go through all the starting quarterbacks or projected starting quarterbacks across the league. I mean, in my head right now, and I mentioned it in segment number 2, I wouldn't put Aiden O'Connell below the quarterbacks that are coming into the league that haven't even taken a snap. Like, I can't say that Aiden is worse than them when we don't know what they look like, right? You have no idea. They've done absolutely nothing in the league. Aiden O'Connell has won games, and at one point, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league down the stretch of the season last year. So I can't keep going back to last year. He's going to have to do it this year. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting. We'll have to go through all the starting quarterbacks. Maybe that'll be like Wednesday's conversation, Wednesday or Thursday. We'll try to get it in sometime this week where we just really kind of analyze, break down, compare and contrast all the projected starting quarterbacks in the National Football League and, see where we feel like a realistic landing spot is for Aiden O'Connell 1 through 32 as far as starting quarterbacks. But thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Got time for, I guess, a couple more real quick. Enzo from the DMV, he's calling to answer the question of who the Raiders could take the place of as a playoff team in 2024. That's actually a conversation I was going to have today, but we're going to push it back till tomorrow. But here he is, Enzo from the DMV.
Hey, Q, it's Enzo in the DMV. As always, you have the best sports podcast on all platforms. Love what you do. Per your question regarding who we can replace in the playoffs, I say the Steelers and the Browns. Wilson is a shell of his former self, if he even was anything but a flash in the pan, but a great team and coach built around him. As for the Browns, you made it last year on a wing and a prayer with a resurgence of Flacco. Stay healthy at QB and we will see. By the way, bring the nation to Charm City on the 15th. Baltimore, be scared. Just win, baby.
Enzo, thanks for the call. Appreciate the response. The Browns and the Steelers, and it's interesting because they're in the same division. That division right there is going to tell us a lot, right? That's a tough division. You got Baltimore, you got Pittsburgh, you got the Browns, you've got the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, like, everyone can't make the playoffs, right? So who's going to win the division? If Baltimore is going to win the division, where's the playoff team coming from, right? Or what does Cincinnati have to say about it with the healthy Joe Burrow? Is Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, can they help to get Mike Tomlin to the place where he can make the playoffs? The Browns, right? I mean, I know Joe Flacco finished the season last year, but they literally went through 5 quarterbacks. Is Deshaun Watson really that dude, right? That division may determine a lot for the Raiders. I'm glad you brought up those teams. And like I said, we'll have this conversation coming up tomorrow on the show. I definitely want to deep dive into it. I've actually been holding on to it for a time that we could talk about it. And I think that tomorrow is the right time. So Enzo, thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. We'll close out with a text from Josh in Paradise, California. It says, Q, I keep hearing folks say that the Raiders have 10 home games this year due to the two LA games. Not to be a downer, but I'd argue we have 2 home games. Just the LA games. We have not established a home field advantage in Vegas. It's It's a very away fan base destination game. As a former season ticket holder in Oakland, Section 114, I know what a home field advantage is, and it's not Vegas, at least not yet. I hope we get there one day, but it's going to take consistent winning. Love the show. Thanks to all you do. That's Josh from Paradise, California. Thanks for the text. I do appreciate you, and you're right. I say it all the time. Winning, winning, winning. The Raiders have to continue to establish winning at home more times than not. And they did a good job at Allegiant last season, but they've got to continue to do that and stack wins. And it is a destination location. Oakland wasn't, and I love Oakland, but Oakland was not somewhere that opposing fans look at the schedule and say, oh, man, my team's going to be playing in Oakland in September. I got to go. Like, it just wasn't the reality of it. Vegas is a different animal, as we know. Why I say that the Raiders have 10 home games is because they have 8 that they play at Allegiant Stadium. We know that. And then the trip to L.A. is quick. Like that. It's not necessarily for me, and I can only speak for me. It's not necessarily home field advantage. It's just they don't have to go very far, right? LA is just a hop, skip, and a jump down the road, right? If I can drive to it, it ain't far, right? And I will, right? So, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I know that I'll be at 8 home games for sure at Allegiant Stadium, but I'll also be at those games at SoFi because it's that quick. It's just a boom. Get in the car, ride down the road, go to the game, cover the game, do the locker room action, boom, get back into the car, and head back to the house. Right? It's not a whole 2, 3, 4 day event to try to get to and from where we got to go. So that's why I say it's 10 home games, but I understand what you're saying. And on top of that, at SoFi, the Raiders haven't been very successful. So far, they've played, 4 times in SoFi, and they're 1-4. So it's not like the success rate is good there, even though Raider Nation will show up and show out at SoFi Stadium. So your point is very valid. But for me, the reason I say 10 home games is just the travel, and that it is no travel. You know, it's a 30-minute flight? That's nothing, right? By the time you get settled in your seat and get a glass of water, you're already landing. So that's why that's a quick trip. But Josh, thanks so much for that text. Great stuff. It's always good to hear from you. And that's all I got for today's show. Coming up tomorrow, as I mentioned, we'll talk about the playoffs, the teams that made the playoffs in 2023. And if there's a team or two that I could look at or we could look at and say, yeah, the Raiders could replace them in 2024 as the playoff team. It's pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to it. We'll do it tomorrow. We'll have more news and notes. And, of course, we'll have calls and texts straight off the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.